Welcome back to Unraveling the Pattern. I'm Lauren, and this is a follow-up to my Wheel of Time teaser trailer breakdown video, with even more details, Easter eggs, and other things I missed in the first video. If you haven't watched that yet, go and check it out first. I mention about 100 different things, and I break down the trailer by dialogue and by reordering the events of the teaser. If you're new to my channel, please like the video and consider subscribing. Spoiler warning, if you're new to the TV show or haven't read the whole Wheel of Time book series and the prequel novel New Spring, this video is not for you. Keep an eye out for my spoiler-free teaser breakdown and explanation video, coming soon. Seriously, you don't want this amazing story spoiled. You've been warned. In my previous video, I attempted to reorder all of the 89 shots that we get in the teaser into what I thought was the correct sequence from the show. However, after reading everyone's amazing comments and discussing this more with all of you wonderful people, I've realized that I made a few mistakes, and I've noticed even more details as well. So here's the original order of the shots in the teaser. Then here is my assumed sequence from my last video with the cuts to black and title cards at the end removed. And this is how I now envision the sequence of events. Before I get into the updated sequence though, I want to address some of the mistakes I made in the previous video. I accidentally learned something very valuable about how to increase YouTube engagement through the comments. If you make a mistake in a video or a false claim, people will call it out many times in the comments. This has actually helped my video get better reach, so I'm really happy I made these mistakes. But now it's time to set the record straight. First, this shot is obviously a scene in Emond's Field. I don't know why I assumed this came later in a different village. I think the rain and the dark figure just made me assume this was a fade on a horse, and I didn't give it much thought beyond that. It really made me think of these shots from the Fellowship of the Ring. You can see that the village green, the tree, and the Winespring Inn and other buildings perfectly match the set of Emond's Field, but it's also important to note that there are no lamps or Beltane decorations that I can see, so I'll reorder this in my sequence. I'm also pretty sure this is not a fade, but is likely Moiraine. More on that in a minute. Another obvious mistake was me assuming that this shot only had 5 writers. There are obviously 6 people in this shot, and I just overlooked it. Thanks to everyone who noticed my mistake and let me know. Just to keep the engagement high, I'll be making a few more false claims throughout this video, I'm sure. Please be sure to let me know in the comments. Another detail I overlooked is the background in these scenes. Excuse me if my attention was drawn to shirtless Rand and Egwene instead. The lamps and stone columns here look like they could match the interior shots of the Winespring Inn as well, so I'll definitely be reordering this in my sequence and discussing this in further detail. Other really cool details that I missed before in no particular order include this amazing glimpse of what looks like an Ogier grove on the island of Tarvalin. Also, yes, the White Tower does look very phallic, even more so than how we've all imagined it thanks to these girthy pieces here. How interesting that an island with this shape would have a large, massive white shaft in its center. Look here in this shot. I missed this entirely the first time, but is that Steve in the background? In this shot, Emond's Field is probably right down here, so I was a bit off when assuming the village was right up next to the Mountains of Mist. Still, I think it looks different than how it was described in the books, but I like it. I didn't notice originally that Egwene's hair was unbraided in this scene, yet she appears to have stains on her dress in this scene and her hair is braided, so I'm pretty sure I got the order wrong. More on this in a bit. How could I have failed to mention Moraine's Kisiera in this scene? To be fair, I did notice this, but I just forgot to include it in my first video. Also, I mentioned that everyone's backs were turned, but actually, I like that the greens, in what feels like a direct defiance to the reds, are not turning their backs here. In this shot, I missed pointing out that this seat is empty. How much do you want to bet this is Karine Nagashi's now empty seat? Also, notice that the greens and reds are closer to the Amyrlin seat. I like this detail a lot, as these are likely the 2 largest, most influential Ajas, and they're the most opposite when it comes to dealing with men and warders. I don't know if I agree with this, but someone pointed out that perhaps Swan's origins will be changed, and she could be from the sea folk. I'm totally okay with this idea, but my guess is that these are still tattoos of a fisherman's daughter from Tyr. Also, I wondered what the water damage was here, but it's obviously an intricate texture from the marble that the Amyrlin seat was made from. I like this detail. Oh, and look at the intricate details on the furniture in this shot. How could I have missed it? I'm sure I've still missed some details, but let's talk about my updated theory for the sequence change. I'll also point out a few other details as I go. Now, I think this first sequence was way out of order in my initial breakdown. This is based on some great discussion from all of you and from some leaked audition scripts that I had forgotten about. Thank you to those of you who reminded me about these scripts. Over the last couple of years, some actors who auditioned for the show released videos of their auditions that were promptly taken down, but thanks to my friends at watseries.com, the transcriptions are still available. Since these have been published already online for months, I think it's okay for me to share these. If you don't want to have certain scenes from the show and the dialogue from those scenes spoiled, you might not want to watch the rest of this video, but I don't think any of this this is going to spoil major plot points that I'm not already pointing out in this video to begin with. Also, it should be noted that these scenes could be very old or meant just for auditions and might not end up in the show at all. They even used code names for things like Wisdom, Dragon, White Tower, Aja, Amerlin's Seat, and the names of the characters. So I'm going to edit these slightly with the names and terms we're familiar with so that it makes more sense. I'm now more certain that we'll probably see more days in Emond's Field before the Winter Night attack than what we get in the first book. There are two scenarios that I have in mind, but I'm pretty sure it's the second scenario that's correct. Here is how I have scenario 1 broken down. If this all takes place over just one day and night like in the book, then I think the order would look something like this. If Rand and Tam are making their way into the village early in the morning, then I think these subsequent shots could all happen in sequence on that same day, and we could get Beltane preparations and competitions on that day as well. Then celebrations that evening, followed by the attack on Winter Night that same night. However, there are a few things wrong with this sequence, including the rain in Emond's Field, and the idea that Rand and Egwene would be having sex in the middle of the Winespring Inn common room during a huge holiday with people celebrating just outside the doors. So I think this actually takes place over 2 or 3 days and nights. Here's my new theory for how these events fit together in scenario 2. Day 1. Egwene has her women's circle test first and is asked by Nynaeve to become her apprentice. Night 1. Rand and Tam are on their way to the village late at night, and Rand sees the Fade. These two scenes could really come from anywhere and could be out of order here, but I'm putting them here under the assumption that this happens late at night as Rand and Tam and Bella are making their way to the village, right up front. I also noticed that this shot has been shown reversed in some promotional clips that Amazon Prime is using for shorter ads. It's made to look even more closely like it matches the angle of the second shot. However, upon closer inspection, I realized something that likely breaks these two scenes apart. I think this first shot is what Rand sees on the quarry road, but this shot probably comes later as part of the Winter Night attack. I would guess and hope that we see Lan face off with the Fade after all of the Trollocs are dead. Notice how the Fade's face is only lit by moonlight here, but in this shot it has an orangish light, which implies it's out in the open, lit by firelight or lamps during the fight later near the village green. So I've duplicated this shot for later to discuss how I think it fits in with the Winter Night attack. But one more detail with this shot that I didn't mention before. This Fade gives me Mouth of Sauron vibes from the extended Return of the King film. I think this Voldemort looking Fade is much scarier and interesting than a pale dude with a nose and hair and no eyes as described in the books. As I said before, as long as Fades are smart, I'm good with it. Next, I think things start to get foggy and rain begins to fall after the Althors have already made it to the Winespring Inn and unloaded their barrels. We see a dark rider entering the village after Tam and Rand are likely inside the inn. I assumed this was a Fade at first, but this is actually probably Moiraine Sedai. We cut to a scene of Moiraine entering the Winespring Inn late at night. Notice the wet boots in this scene and the water droplets on her hood here. I missed this before, but it's likely that Moiraine came to the village the night before the Beltane preparation and celebrations. The rain also explains why her hood was up in the first place, and why there are no Beltane lamps here. Then, even later that night, after the common room is closed, and Lan and Moiraine are in their rooms, or room, Rand and Egwene are alone in the common room here. I originally assumed that this scene with Rand and Egwene happens much later in the season, possibly in Faldara. However, after closer inspection of the inner walls of the inn, and the lamps here, I think those commenters are correct in assuming that this scene takes place in the Winespring Inn, likely the night before the Beltane and Winter Night celebrations, but after Egwene's Women's Circle initiation. Notice how her hair looks braided here. I also assume this takes place in the common room and not in their own rooms, because of the large open area and the tables and stools shown here. Also, there were some more leaked audition videos that were transcribed by WatSeries.com that imply that this intimate scene between Rand and Egwene is likely going to happen much earlier in the story than I originally thought. There are two scenes in this transcription. I believe this scene happens first and is not shown in the trailer. I'm not a good actor, so bear with me as I read this dialogue. Also, keep in mind that these scenes were from very early audition tapes, so they could be different in the final show or removed entirely. Scene 1. Rand, you've been avoiding me. Egwene, or biding my time until I could get you alone. Rand, I'd say avoiding. Egwene laughs and shrugs. Rand, how did it go today? Egwene, you know I can't talk about. Rand, it's me. You can at least say it was good or bad, can't you? Egwene, it was good. Looks uncomfortable. Sorry, it's just I was thinking about. Rand, sometimes you think too much. Egwene laughs and smiles. I've missed you. Rand, you know my dad said I used to pick baskets of berries to bring to you when I was a kid, like some lovesick puppy. Egwene, sounds sweet to me. Very sweet. Notice Rand mentions something that already took place. My guess is that this scene is actually a women's circle initiation scene, and it happens first. Also, notice how Egwene mentions that she's thinking about something, but then Rand cuts her off. Maybe she's thinking about Nynaeve's offer to become an apprentice. I'm guessing this leaked scene is followed by them having having sex, which will likely happen off camera as the show appears to be rated TV-14. Then we get this second scene later, or after the fade to black. Note it says, scene takes place around a fire. Rand, so you let me fall asleep? Egwene, you act like I had some say in the matter. Rand, so what really happened today? Egwene, it wasn't today, it was before. Nynaeve, she asked me to become her apprentice. Rand, what? No, you? Egwene, she asked. I didn't say yes or no. She thinks I'll be able to read the signs if I work with her. Rand, really? It's a lonely life that. No husband, no kids. Certainly hasn't made Nynaeve happier. Egwene, I don't think anything would make Nynaeve happy. Rand sighs. I should get to bed. I like the little nod to Rand falling asleep after they have sex. This reminds me of the scene in the 5th book, after Rand has sex for the first time with a certain someone, and she says, and I'm paraphrasing, I have heard men sleep afterwards. Again, Rand mentions something that happened earlier in the day in this dialogue. I'm assuming he's referring to just the Women's Circle initiation. I also think that after this night, Egwene decides that she really does want to take up Nynaeve on her offer. It seems like Rand and Tam are probably just going to stay in Emond's Field for the night, and will likely not return to their farm until the next day. Day number 2. Morning. Egwene decides to take up Nynaeve on her offer to become an apprentice. Early that morning, Nynaeve takes Egwene to this cliff to start her training. Notice that Egwene's hair is braided here, and if you look closely, there are stains on her dress that match the paint from this earlier scene. I have to admit, because of these stains, I'm also unsure if perhaps this sequence takes place on the same day as the Women's Circle initiation, but I'll leave it here for now. I'm convinced now that this happens after the paint shot. Nynaeve pushes Egwene into the river, and Egwene learns to be strong, but also to let go and surrender. To me, this shows a deep understanding of Egwene's character. I really think they understand her and her motivations, and I'm very happy with how it's being portrayed. I've always thought of Egwene as a bit of a chameleon. She's driven, unbiased, and is willing to learn and grow and take on attributes from all of her various teachers along the way. This makes her the strong leader that she eventually becomes, ambitious but teachable, strong and steadfast. Day 2, later that day. Then we get Beltane preparations throughout the day. Wide shot of the mountains and river and then Emond's Field. Look at this promotional shot of Moiraine that was released along with this article in Empire magazine. This came out the same day as the teaser trailer, which is why I missed it at first. But this is obviously Moiraine walking through Emond's Field during the day of or before the Beltane celebrations. There was another transcribed audition of a scene between Moiraine and Nynaeve that likely takes place here. I'm not going to read this whole thing. You can pause the video to read it or go and check the link to this article on watseries.com, which I've included in the description. I've replaced the term shaman with wisdom and read the signs with listen to the wind. The main thing to point out here is when Moiraine mentions that Nynaeve, quote, had your ceremony. This heavily implies to me that this scene of Egwene is likely the Women's Circle initiation ceremony, as we've already discussed. According to this transcription, Nynaeve had her ceremony 5 years ago when she was around 20. Then we get these scenes of Mat, Perrin, and Rand enjoying themselves with some drinks and dice later in the morning or during the day. Egwene enters in a different dress, looking stoic, and Nynaeve beams with pride. I'm guessing she passed her first test and accepted the offer to become Nynaeve's apprentice. Rand looks on with those puppy eyes, not knowing that she's probably made the decision to pursue becoming a wisdom, and they'll likely never be married. I think if this sequence is correct, then this scene of Rand with the bow probably happens sometime during this day, either as a Beltane bow competition or with Rand aiming to shoot a raven. I still hope this is Tam and Bella in the background, and I hope we get some mention of the flame and the void here. I think the partying will eventually slow down a lot. When the Trollocs do attack, I don't think we'll see this many people around. I've reordered this sequence to make more sense with the fire in the trees. First, we'll probably see Moiraine and Lan burst out of the inn and say something like, Trollocs are attacking. Then we'll see an initial wave of Trollocs that rush in and attack some of the villagers. Moiraine and Lan fight off a few of them with these initial attacks before the tree is burning. Lan will kill this Trolloc, and in case you missed it, we see this Trolloc eating or maybe just kissing this villager in the background. Lan looks over his shoulder and sees more Trollocs coming. Then we cut to chaos happening elsewhere in the village as Nynaeve and Egwene are fighting off Trollocs and helping injured villagers. I also think that by giving us some time with Rand and Egwene and their friends earlier in the day, Rand and Tam could potentially still go back to their farm to tend to their animals before returning the next day. So it's possible that we will still get a cutback to Rand and Tam during some of these scenes back at the farm, and the awesome moments in the Westwood with Tam being injured. I really hope this still happens. This would also give us the opportunity to see Narg talking to Rand. We know Narg will be in the show based on one of Rafe's Q&As. Cut back to a swarm of Trollocs and a Myrddraal facing down Lan. Lan fights the Myrddraal and eventually kills it as Moiraine continues taking out Trollocs with the help of some of the villagers. Moiraine then gathers in the one power from all around her and summons lightning, which takes out the remaining Trollocs but also catches the tree on the village green on fire. In the aftermath, Moiraine gathers the power around her again. Notice all of the bodies in this scene. And then maybe she uses her last bits of strength to put out the fires. Day 3. Most of this is not pictured, but this is how I see the rest of this playing out before they leave. Morning. Rand and Tam make it back to the village in the morning. Rand sees the destruction and aftermath and finds Moiraine. Moiraine uses an Angreal to heal Tam, and she convinces Rand to leave with her. I think this scene will be a goodbye between Tam and Rand. However, this could also be a great father-son moment before the attack on Winternight, with Rand and Tam talking about Rand's mother, Carial Thor. Maybe this happens just before the Trollocs attack them at their farm. I also imagine we'll have a scene where Moiraine talks about Manetheren sometime during this sequence. Then, the sequence is more or less the same as how I imagined in my previous video, with a few more tweaks. The Emonsfielders leave. Notice there are only 6 riders here, so Nynaeve is not yet with them. They eventually stop at Shadar Logoth and get separated. I did miss one other big detail that was pointed out to me in many comments. I misplaced the scene of Nynaeve and Lan in my original sequence. I assumed that this scene came earlier, while everyone was still in Emonsfield, partying, perhaps on the night just before the attack, but it's very likely later in the sequence, here, after the group's separation at Shadar Logoth. There was another leaked video of someone who auditioned for the part of Nynaeve, and in this scene, it's very clear that 1. The group has already been separated at Shadar Logoth or elsewhere when Nynaeve comes across Lan. 2. This implies heavily that Nynaeve wasn't with the group at first, but joins later. 3. Nynaeve probably is holding a sword here, and not a beating stick or switch like I originally thought. 4. Moiraine was injured, very likely in Shadar Logoth or during the sequence when everyone is separated. 5. Nynaeve tracks them. Lan is surprised, and then he tells her, quote, "The Dark One is coming for your friends." He then asks her to help heal Moiraine, who was injured while protecting the Emonsfielders. Special thanks to WatSeries.com for this transcription. You should really bookmark WatSeries.com. They find so many amazing details and leaks related to the show, and their writers are very thorough, not to mention just absolutely lovely people. Go and support them. I'll include a link to these specific articles in the description. One more thing that I think I got wrong in my original sequence. I assumed that the attack from the Dragonsworn came before Logain breaks the shield and kills Kareen Nagashi. However, after reading this next leaked script transcription, which is likely from Liandrin's audition, I think these scenes are probably flipped, and this sequence with Logain breaking the shield comes first. I'm also less sure that Logain will fully escape. I think Moiraine might actually keep him shielded on her own and prevent his escape during the Dragonsworn attack later. Still, I like to think Logain will escape here, which is why Moiraine, Alanna, and Liandrin are being reprimanded in front of the Hall of the Tower later. Again, I'm not going to read this full transcription, but I've changed the first Aes Sedai character to Kareen Nagashi, and I've changed Leona to Liandrin. Elaine, later spelled Elaine, is likely Alanna, and Miara is definitely Moiraine. I changed Temple to White Tower and Queen to Amerlin. Also, I think this last Aes Sedai line comes from Moiraine, but I'm unsure about some of these, so I left them as just Aes Sedai. A few things to note in this transcription. If there was an attack going on outside, I don't think the dialogue would be the same. Kareen claims that only she, Liandrin, and Alanna are strong enough to hold the shield on Logain, and only if they work in pairs. It's great to see Moiraine holding the shield on her own in this scene after this explanation. They seem to have shifts holding the shield, and Moiraine was supposed to help an hour ago. I assume she's still recovering from being healed. Also, this is just an assumption on my part that Logain breaking the shield happens at this same moment, but it makes sense to me that he would attempt to break free right as they're changing shifts, as the shield is passed from one sister to the next. Finally, notice how this Aes Sedai, probably Moiraine, mentions to Kareen that she, quote, "used your strength to heal me, let me share the burden." The healing very likely came first, after Nynaeve failed to heal Moiraine when they met up after the Shadar Logoth sequence. I hope that Nynaeve witnesses the healing here, because it would strengthen her motivation to learn to use the one power to do something she couldn't do earlier with just her wisdom, knowledge, and herbs. The rest of my original sequence is the same, but one other minor detail that I wanted to point out is that we only see Nynaeve, Rand, and Mat with Lan here. Could Egwene already be at the White Tower beginning her training at this point? Perhaps she was left behind when everyone met up in Tar Valon. Maybe she won't follow the rest of the group to Faldara. These others in the background could be loyal and possibly Min, or it could also be Egwene and Perrin with Moiraine. And that's it. I discuss all the rest of this sequence in much greater detail in my other Unraveling the Teaser video. Go and check it out. Once again, what did I miss? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you to my newest patrons, and to all of you who support me through Patreon, or through joining on YouTube. And thank you for liking and subscribing. If you enjoy my content related to teaser and trailer breakdowns, and don't want to miss anything in the future, please consider hitting the notification bell as well. Until next time.